Hey everybody, Will from Studio Zombie 3D here. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Creality Sonic Pad. This is a clipper controller that allows you to control up to 4 printers at a time. I'm going to be using my Ender 3 S1 Pro and the Ender 5 S1 with the video today. Let's get right into it. The first thing we're going to do is get everything out of the box. The first thing we see when we open it up is this instruction manual. This has everything you need to know to get the pad set up and running. It currently supports 22 Creality printers, and any other FDM that runs Clipper. Here we have the 7-inch pad. It includes 4 USB ports, a LAN port, and then a PS2 connector for the accelerometer sensor. There is also 2 parts here with a reset and a hard reset, as well as the kickstands. And here on the other side we have our power button. I received the international version, so my power supply is a different one. It has several different kinds of plates on it for different power sources around the world. Next up we have all of our accessories. First we have the sensor cable for the accelerometer. Next up we have a standard cable for the USB. It also includes multiple adapters. And here we have our USB stick, the accelerometer sensor itself, USB adapters, and a few screws. Alright, here we have everything laid out on the table. Alright, here we have everything out of the box. We have our pad, our power supply, our accelerometer sensor cable, our USB cable, as well as 2 adapters for the USB cable. Next, we have the accelerometer sensor itself. And here we have the USB drive with the instruction manuals as well as the bracket for the accelerometer. And of course, here's a few screws for attaching the accelerometer. Next, I'm going to power up the pad and set it up with the Ender 3 S1 Pro. It takes a few seconds for it to boot up and get you to the welcome screen. The first thing we're going to do is set our language. And then we have the privacy policy. We're just going to click on agree and wait for the countdown to finish and then hit next. Now we're going to go ahead and set our region. Our next step is going to be setting up our Wi-Fi connection or a LAN connection. I have already got this set up on my Wi-Fi, so I'm good to go. Here we can change the name of the Sonic Pad. I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. Now here we have the menu with a selection of printers. Creality currently has 22 printers that support this Creality Sonic Pad. I only have the Ender 3 S1 Pro and the Ender 5 S1, so I'm going to be using those. Here I'm going to pick the Ender 3 S1 Pro. There are 2 models. I have the F401 model, so I'm going to select that and hit next. Now we're going to insert an SD card into a USB reader and then into the pad. This is going to place the firmware for the printer on the SD card. If an error pops up, you'll need to format your SD card, FAT32 with 4096 allocation units. Alright, now we're going to remove the SD card from the pad and insert it into the printer. Insert the SD card into the printer and then hit Next. It'll now tell you to power on your printer. Now we're going to go ahead and switch the Ender 3 S1 Pro on. It's going to take a few seconds for it to flash. Now we're going to hit Next. Next, using the USB cable supplied, we're going to connect it to the USB 1 port, and then into the printer. It might take a minute or two for it to connect to the printer. Once the connection has been established, we're going to hit Next. Now we're going to go through a self-test routine. This is going to check the hot end and the cooling fans, and then it's going to walk you through the leveling routine. Once you have confirmed the cooling fans are working, we're going to go ahead and do the manual leveling. The first step of the leveling process on a Sonic Pad has you set the Z offset. This will home the hot end to the center of the bed, and using a piece of paper we're going to set the offset. Just lower it until it just starts to grab the piece of paper. Once we have the Z offset set where we want it, we're going to hit Next. This is going to walk us through the manual leveling process. You're going to go around the bed and hit each of the 4 corners and level it manually with the dials. It's always a good idea to go around a couple times just to make sure everything's just right. My bed's pretty level, so I don't have to go through the whole process. Once you have it manually leveled, you're going to hit Next. The next step, we're going to heat up the bed. I set the temperature to 60 degrees. It takes a few minutes for it to warm up, but once it's ready, we're going to go ahead and do the auto level. Once the bed has reached temperature, we can go ahead and run the auto level. This will go through the 5x5 grid. You can adjust the grid size later on by going into the printer.cfg file and changing the grid size. Once the leveling has completed, it'll show you a 3D representation of the bed. What I personally like to do is I like to run the auto level a few times, and then adjust the bed screws on the four corners slowly until I get the bed as level as I can get. Once you're happy with how it's level, we're going to go ahead and hit next. And now we're complete the setup. It's going to reboot the printer and the pad just so everything can be saved. Once it is rebooted, you're going to be taken back to the main interface. Here we have the main screen. The first tab we have is the Move section. This is just for moving your axis and homing. Next up we have our preheating menu. They have settings for PLA and PETG, as well as you can set your own custom temperature. Next we have the control section that has extrusion, fan, temperature, and the motor control. Next to control we have our configure tab. This is where we have all of our leveling options and our probe calibration. It also has our network settings and local information on our printer, as well as the movement parameters which controls our acceleration velocity and our square corner velocity. Next we have our camera and then our other settings. Next in other settings we have most of the settings for the pad such as the break screen language, theme, and sound. There is also the one-touch changeover in the advanced options. The advanced options has all of our settings for the PID tuning and a resonance tuning. And here we have our advanced tab. I like to enable display macros in console. And here are our PID calibration menus. I recommend running these once you have the pad set up, as well as measuring the resonances. Under the extrusion configuration menu, we have our pressure advanced smooth time. Also, we have our extrusion rotation distance, which is equal to the east depths on marlin, as well as our maximum temperatures. They've also added a little assistant in the top corner here. You can export the log or look up a FAQ if you're having some issues. As I said earlier, I recommend running the PID auto tune on the bed and the hot end, but the main thing I wanted to show here is how to measure resonances. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into the advanced options menu and then down to measuring resonances. We're going to have our cable and sensor ready to go. The first thing we're going to do is click on the Ender 3S1 and then Next. Now we're going to jump over to the printer and attach the bracket for the sensor. I printed this before I converted to Clipper. Creality supplies two longer screws for the hot end in the Sonic Pad. Just remove these two screws on the hot end and then replace them with the two in the back. Next, using the self-tapping screws from the pack, we're going to attach the sensor to the bracket. Once we have everything attached, we're going to plug the cable into the back. Once everything's ready, we're going to hit continue. It's going to test to make sure the accelerometer is connected. It might take a minute. Once it's ready, we're going to go ahead and click on Start Test. It's going to home the hot end. Once it is homed, it's going to start vibrating. It takes a few minutes to complete the test. Once the test is done, the vibration will stop and it'll take a minute to calculate. Once it's ready, it'll ask you to click Next. Now we're going to move the sensor from the hot end to the bed. You only have a few minutes to do this, or else the timeout will happen and you'll have to start over. So we're going to go ahead and remove the sensor from the bracket. Now with these style printers, you gotta get the sensor on the hotbed. So I like to use a bit of green painter's tape and then I slide it under the hot end. Unfortunately, the hot end doesn't move for this part of the test, so just do your best to get it as close to center as possible. Once the sensor is secure, we're going to go ahead and click Next. The same process is going to repeat on the bed. The bed will start vibrating and take a few minutes to find the perfect resonance. Now that the test is completed, we can remove the sensor from the bed and hit continue. The pad will reboot. Over on the computer, I have the web UI loaded. This is the main interface for the Creality Sonic Pad. This lets you control all aspects of the printer remotely. Here we have all our access control, our temperature graph console, macros, fan controls, file list, printer limits, and our G-code preview. Over on the left side we have various tabs, which include our console, our file list, our print history, our time lapse, our tuning with our bed level, our configuration menu with our printer CFG file. Here we have the system information and as well as our settings. Back on the main screen, we can click on the three buttons and choose the printer we're connected to. This makes it really handy for switching between printers quickly. Before we proceed, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what I like to do with the resonance tuning values. First, we're going to go over to our console and scroll up to find our X results. And here we have the various input shapers here, as well as the recommended type. For the X, it recommends the EI shaper at 55 Hz. Now the maximum acceleration it recommends here is 5600. The max for the Ender 3S one is set at 5000. So I'm going to go down and check out the bed levels. And here we have the input shapers for the bed. And the recommended one for the bed is MZV. Now I'm going to go up and check it to see what MZV has. Now I recommend a max acceleration of 4800. That's the value I like to use personally. So we're going to remember 4800, and then we're going to go over to the configuration tab. Once here, we're going to click on the printer CFG file. This is the configuration file for the printer connected. This has all the values for your steppers, your extruder, as well as your acceleration and pressure advance. We're going to scroll down to the bottom where they have the acceleration values. Now here where it says max acceleration 5000, I'm going to change that to 4800. Next, I'm going to hit save and restart. The printer itself will restart the firmware. It takes a few seconds and then it'll reload. Now we're going to go back to the main screen and see what our max acceleration is at now. And here it is at 4800. And then our accel to decel at 2400. Now we're ready to load a print and see what we can do. The Creality Sonic Pad support site has recommended Cura profiles for various printers. I recommend checking them out just to give you a baseline of settings. Now that I'm ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and slice a Benchy real quick. I'm using a 120mm/second profile. Now I'm just going to save the file. But before I upload and start printing, I'm going to go ahead and add the Ender 5 now. It's just a quick process. We're going to go ahead and we're going to click on Pick Printer. Next, we're going to click on Add Device. Next, the pad is going to ask you to what USB port the printer is going to be connected to. I'm going to be using the USB 2 for the Ender 5. Now it's going to go through the same setup process that we went through for the Ender S3 Pro. Just follow the screens and in no time it'll be set up and ready to go. Now that we have both printers set up on the pad, we can quickly switch between them by clicking on Pick Printer. It takes a couple seconds and then it'll load the printer. It's just that quick. And back to the Ender 5. Now we can go ahead and upload our files. I recommend making a folder for each printer. When you upload files, they just go to a mass directory, so there isn't one for each printer. You have to make them yourself, just something to keep in mind. Once the file's been uploaded, we can go ahead, click on it, and hit print. And here we have the Ender 3 and the Ender 5's printing off the pad. And here I have the first print I did on the Ender 5S1 with the pad. It's a Skeletor bus from Eastman. I printed this at 200mm a second and 100mm a second outer walls. I'm absolutely blown away by the quality of this print. There's no flaws or defects, and the fact that it printed clean at 200 absolutely blows me away. Next up again from Eastman, I did his Hellboy bust. Again at 200mm a second with 100mm second outer walls. Absolutely amazing quality. The seam could have been locked to a little better location, but overall I'm super happy about the quality of this print. Next up, from the Ender 3 S1 Pro, I printed this Flexi Phoenix from Flexi Factory. I did this at 140mm a second, and for a bed slinger it's super clean. I'm really impressed about the quality and how fast it was printing. There's nothing wrong with any of the joints and it moves freely. Next up I have a Flexi Yeti. This one is printed on stock Marlin at 60mm a second. Really nice print, looks smooth and clean. Nothing wrong with it. Now I did the same Yeti with the Sonic Pad at 140mm a second, and I'm absolutely blown away. I think it actually looks a little better than the stock Marlin setup. A lot of this is thanks to the input shaper that you calibrate with the accelerometer. And then just a couple small random prints. A Flexi Crab from Flexi Factory I did at 200 millimeters a second on the Ender 5. No problems whatsoever, super clean. I also did the Robot Flexi Eye keychain. This was also done at 200 millimeters a second. No problems with this whatsoever. It took no time to print this off and I'm super happy with the results. During my time with the Sonic Pad, I was absolutely blown away. It's super easy to get Clipper set up and calibrated. If you have a Clipper-compatible printer, or one of the supported Creality models, I highly recommend checking out the Creality Sonic Pad. The ability to control 4 printers and the printing speed is worth it. The input shaper makes making sure you have clean prints super easy. Alright everybody, that was my setup and review of the Creality Sonic Pad. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button to get more videos from Studio Zombie 3D. Also be sure to check out the various Studio Zombie 3D social media as well as our new Facebook group. Thanks for watching everybody and we'll see you in the next video.